The Wall Street Journal reports the United States is planning to start funding local Afghan militias to fight the Taliban in remote parts of Afghanistan. The first U.S.-funded militias will be established in Wardak province in eastern Afghanistan. The plan is based on a similar model used in Iraq. If the effort in Wardak is successful, U.S. commanders hope to create more militias in other parts of Afghanistan in early 2009. The militia push is controversial. Afghan President Hamid Karzai vetoed an earlier American proposal to create local militias because he feared they might one day fall under the sway of regional warlords. Canadian Defense Minister Peter MacKay has publicly opposed the initiative, saying it would be counterproductive. A federal jury in New Jersey has convicted 5 Muslim immigrants of conspiracy to kill U.S. military personnel. Prosecutors claimed the men were plotting to kill U.S. soldiers at Fort Dix or another military base. Defense attorneys argued the men were entrapped by a pair of paid government informants. Faten Schneur, the mother of one of the men, Mohammed Schneur, talked to reporters after the verdict.
This is not justice. This is not a justice. This setup for these kids. They give the criminal people like Mahmoud Omar and Basnik, they are killer. They are the criminal. They give this government is not justice. They give this criminal people money to put this innocent kids in the jail, and this is not justice. This is not United States. We know we came here for freedom, for good country. My son, he not kill nobody. He not buy any weapon. He not do anything.
The 5 Muslim men were arrested in May 2007 after 2 of the men tried to buy automatic weapons from an FBI informant. The same informant had helped scout out military installations for an attack, offered to introduce the men to an arms dealer, and gave them a list of weapons he could procure, including machine guns and rocket-propelled grenades. The 5 men face life in prison. The Associated Press has revealed many of the nation's largest banks are claiming they can't track how they're using the billions of dollars they've received in aid from U.S. taxpayers. The Associated Press contacted 21 banks that received at least $1 billion in government money and asked 4 questions. How much has been spent? What was it spent on? How much is being held in savings? And what's the plan for the rest? None of the banks provided specific answers. When Congress approved the massive bailout, it attached nearly no strings to the money, and the Treasury Department never asked the banks how it would be spent. The Iraqi parliament has delayed a vote on a resolution to allow British and other non-U.S. forces to stay in the country beyond December 31st, when the UN mandate expires. If an interim resolution is not passed before then, non-U.S. troops would have no legal right to remain in Iraq. Britain still has about 4,000 troops in Iraq. It plans to withdraw all but 400 of its troops from Iraq by the end of July. The Iraqi journalist who threw his shoes at President Bush last week said through his lawyer that he will not apologize for his actions. Montazar al-Zaidi has been held in prison for over a week. His attorney said al-Zaidi has been subjected to repeated beatings in jail. He has internal bleeding in his left eye, as well as bruises over his face and stomach. On Monday, White House spokesperson Tony Fratto was asked about the treatment of Montazar al-Zaidi.
Another subject, is the White House at all concerned about reports by the brother of this Iraqi journalist who is being held for throwing his shoes at the president? His brother says in visiting the journalist in jail, he sees signs he's been tortured, missing a tooth, cigarette burns on his ears.
He's in the hands of the Iraqi system. I don't have anything more on the shoe thrower. I think it's been explored extensively, and I have nothing new for you.
The Washington Post reports European nations have begun intensive discussions both within and among their governments on whether to resettle prisoners from the U.S. military prison at Guantanamo as an overture to the incoming Obama administration. At least half a dozen countries are considering resettlement, but only Germany and Portugal have publicly acknowledged it. Meanwhile, China said today it wants Chinese detainees at Guantanamo to be returned to China if Guantanamo is closed. The U.S. is holding 17 Uyghurs, Muslims from Western China. The 17 have been cleared for release, but Washington fears they could be mistreated or even tortured if they're turned over to China. China says the 17 men belong to an outlawed group, the East Turkestan Islamic Movement. In news from Africa, the military in Guinea has taken control of the mineral-rich West African country hours after the death of President Lansana Conté. He had ruled Guinea since 1984. Following his death, the army announced it's dissolved the country's government and suspended the constitution. Doctors Without Borders has released its annual list of the world's 10 worst humanitarian crises. The list focuses on the massive forced civilian displacements, violence, and unmet medical needs in the Democratic Republic of Congo, Somalia, Iraq, Sudan, and Pakistan, along with neglected medical emergencies in Burma and Zimbabwe. Also included in the list is the lack of global attention to the growing prevalence of HIV, tuberculosis infection, and the critical need for increased global efforts to prevent and treat childhood malnutrition, the underlying cause of death for up to 5 million children per year. A coalition of environmental groups has sued the Bush administration in an attempt to stop the Environmental Protection Agency from changing a rule that'll make it easier for Mountaintop mining companies to dump their waste near rivers and streams. Judith Peterson of Kentucky Waterways Alliance said, quote, "The notion that coal mining companies can dump their wastes in streams without degrading them is a fantasy that the Bush administration is now trying to write into law." The new rules overhaul a 25-year-old prohibition that sparked legal and regulatory battles for years. In Utah, the U.S. Attorney's Office in Salt Lake City said Monday it has not decided yet whether to prosecute a University of Utah student who disrupted a controversial federal oil and gas lease auction Friday by posing as a bidder and buying nearly 22,000 acres of public land near Arches and Canyonlands National Parks. The student, Tim DeChristopher, appeared in court Monday, but no charges were filed. A spokeswoman for the U.S. Attorney's Office said, quote, "It will take time to evaluate evidence and make a determination whether we will prosecute." On Monday, Tim DeChristopher told Democracy Now! He's ready to go to jail.
I've seen the need for more serious action by the environmental movement and to protect a livable future for all of us. I've seen that need for a long time, and frankly, I've been hoping that someone would step up and someone would come out and be the leader, and someone would put themselves on the line and make the sacrifices necessary to get us on a path to a more livable future. I guess I just couldn't wait any longer for that someone to come out there and had to accept the fact that that someone might be me.
Visit democracynow.org to watch or listen to or read the full interview with Tim DeChristopher. In Brazil, President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva paid tribute to environmentalist Chico Mendes Monday on the 20th anniversary of his murder. Mendes was one of the world's most prominent defenders of the Amazon rainforest. He was murdered on December 22, 1988, by ranchers opposed to his activism. Since his death, more than 1,100 activists and other rainforest defenders have been killed in Brazil. A new study by Brazil's Catholic Land Commission has found hundreds of Brazilian human rights and environmental activists still face the threat of assassination because of their fight against a coalition of loggers, farmers, and cattle ranchers. At the Vatican, the Pope has said saving humanity from homosexual or transsexual behavior is just as important as saving the rainforest from destruction. The Pope warned that gender theory blurs the distinction between male and female and could thus lead to the self-destruction of the human race.
È necessario che ci sia qualcosa come una ecologia dell'uomo.
We need something like human ecology, meant in the right way. The Church speaks of human nature as man or woman and asks that this order is respected. This is not out-of-date metaphysics. It comes from the faith in the Creator and from listening to the language of creation, despising which would mean self-destruction for humans and therefore a destruction of the work itself of God.
Lesbian and gay Christians have denounced Pope Benedict's comments. The Reverend Sharon Ferguson of the Lesbian and Gay Christian Movement described the Pope's remarks as totally irresponsible and unacceptable in any shape or form. Ferguson said, quote, "It's comments like that that justify homophobic bullying that goes on in schools, and it's comments like that that justify gay bashing." And finally, the New York Times has apologized after publishing a fake letter to the editor Monday, signed by the mayor of Paris, denouncing Caroline Kennedy's bid to fill Hillary Clinton's Senate seat. The Times said the letter was a fake and that it was reviewing its procedures to verify letters to the editor.